Welcome back to a Munchausen's Proxy for a video that probably won't hit with a lot of American fans. World Cup 2022. I know. If you're American, you're probably thinking, why am I talking about this? Well, outside the borders of the United States, soccer is actually a thing. And I happened to grow up outside of the United States for a fair chunk of my childhood and love soccer. Soccer is indeed part of the culture in most other countries. And I love every 4 years when the World Cup comes around. This year, it comes with a bit of controversy. Actually, more than a bit. It comes with a heaping helping of controversy. Why, you might ask, if you don't pay attention at all to soccer? And yes, I'm going to call it soccer because I am, after all, American, and believe it or not, that is the correct term. I know everybody else calls it football, but back in the day when soccer was first made, everything was called football that wasn't played on a horse. Rugby and various other things were also football. Anyway, why is the Soccer World Cup covered in controversy? Two main reasons, and you're probably going to hear a lot about it from the media, activists, possibly some of the players, but from what I've heard thus far, a lot of the players are keeping mum. And whether that's because the federations of the various countries have basically told them, hey, look, go over there, play the damn game, keep your damn mouth shut, or whether that's because they have come to that conclusion themselves. I don't know. First controversy was how Qatar got the World Cup. To put it in perspective, try to imagine Connecticut, which is about the same size as Qatar, applying to host the World Cup by themselves. Not the United States, but the state of Connecticut all by itself hosting the World Cup. Could they do it? Sure, probably, but why would you give the state of Connecticut the World Cup when there are bigger, more prestigious countries who would be applying to host it, and you would be able to show off a bigger geographic region and have the monetary benefits spread out more? Why? Because Qatar has oil and they use some of their petrodollars to buy the World Cup. They weren't the only ones. Russia did it first. Russia had hosted the last World Cup, and when the scandal broke, it turned out that both Russia and Qatar had bribed the people on the committee who choose who gets to have the World Cup. And so Russia wound up with the World Cup last time and Qatar has it now. Why didn't they strip Qatar and Russia of the World Cup when that came to light? I don't know. FIFA is a corrupt swamp of just absolute nastiness that we should have the least amount to do with as possible. But I digress. So anyway, that's the first issue. So Qatar shouldn't even have the World Cup. They're about the size of Connecticut, and they have about 300,000 citizens. What went on after they got the World Cup is probably the bigger scandal. A few years ago, I was watching Bryant Gumbel on HBO, and he had sent, I think, Bernard Goldberg over to Qatar to basically, cover the preparations, the building of the stadiums, the accommodations, the whole 9 yards. And what they found out was quite disturbing. Qatar doesn't have enough citizens to construct 8 stadiums that would be worthy of hosting the World Cup And so they imported people from countries like Nepal. The problem is that a lot of these Middle Eastern countries still have a medieval sensibility about them. When they import workers to work on stuff, they really don't care about safety. They really don't care about their accommodations, at least if they're laborers. It might be different if there's like a computer programmer or an engineer or an architect who's coming in to build one of their palaces or something like that, who's making $1 million just to be there for a year or 3. Those guys probably get really good accommodations. The laborers, however, were packed into these nasty, roach-infested holes whose accommodations for things like showers and toilets were minimal at best. And what Bernard Goldberg and the team at Brian Gumbel's show, I can't remember what the hell it's called. Anyway, what they found out was there were quite a number of bodies going in the opposite direction from countries like Nepal, only they were going back in boxes. And apparently, by one count, 15,000 people died making the stadiums that this World Cup is going to be played in. Now, for all I know, that's an Amnesty International stat, and it's blown up out of proportion. But this was a report that I saw on HBO years ago. So if there were bodies going back to Nepal in boxes years ago, fast forward to completion of the stadiums, how many times does that multiply the bodies that were stacking up when Brian Gumbel had his team over there? And when they asked the Minister of Sport for Qatar about the conditions the workers were in, the safety of the building sites, the health care the workers were getting, the deaths that were showing up, the minister promptly stood up and ended the interview. And so that is the second bigger controversy that is happening in Qatar right now. A lot of people are pushing the players to protest, to boycott, to do something to embarrass the Qataris. And while I understand why that is some people's instinct, I am not with them on that. And here's why. The time for showing that kind of disgust was years ago. We're here. There's nothing that can be done in order to make sure something like that is not going to happen again, that is not either already happened or is not happening elsewhere than on a soccer field. A soccer field is rarely the time to make political statements. And if you do decide that that's where you're going to make your political statements, people are going to see you in the same light as the morons who have been rushing the field in Premier League games this season and trying to glue themselves or tie themselves to the goalposts. Or the morons who decide that standing in the middle of traffic is a good way to get people on your side for your political issue. Or the jackasses who have decided that the best way to get attention for climate change is to dump paint on priceless works of art and then stand there yammering slogans about things that if you ask these idiots questions, they have no answers because they have no idea what they're protesting about, other than the surface level sloganeering that they have been brainwashed with. Nobody sympathizes with these idiots. Why? Because everybody knows they are vapid, inconsequential morons being used as puppets to irritate everybody else into siding with them. And that does not work. It hasn't worked for years now. People have been trying this tactic for years now, and it doesn't work. And it's not going to work in the middle of a World Cup. People don't tune in to the World Cup to watch politics, just like they don't tune into movies and TV shows to listen to politics. There's a reason the entire entertainment industry in the West is going in the crapper. More specifically, Hollywood and the BBC. And it's because they've infused politics in places where politics don't really belong. And sports, for the most part, not always, for the most part, sports is not the place for it. I agree with Hugo Lloris, the goalkeeper for France, who basically said, we only get to do this every 4 years. We spend every 4 years working our butts off to get to this place, and we need to concentrate on what's going on the field. I agree with that. And so, if you want to boycott the World Cup, boycott the World Cup. That's fine. I don't care. Do what you want. But don't get in other people's faces with your politics. It's not the way to win allies in the fight against whatever it is you're fighting for. And in this case, the way Qatar got the World Cup in the first place, and the way they have handled it since they got the World Cup, is probably not going to happen again because of what everybody across the world has seen go on. People have gone to jail over how Qatar and Russia got the World Cup. So that part's taken care of. The killing people while building stadiums for an international sports competition thing, yeah, that's why you don't give countries like Qatar the World Cup in the first place. That's why you don't give countries like China the Olympics in the first place. You think people didn't die building the infrastructure for the Beijing Olympics? I guarantee you they did. There's a reason they call the Great Wall of China the biggest cemetery in the world. China's safety regulations are ridiculous. You hear about a mine explosion or cave-in in the United States, and most of the time everybody gets out. You hear occasionally one or two people die. You hear about a mine collapse in China, and the news is talking hundreds of miners dead. Why? Safety regulations mean nothing in countries where the rulers are not responsible to the people. And that is why you do not give international sporting competitions to dictatorships. So, that being said, how was the first game? First game was between Qatar and Ecuador. And quite frankly, I was kind of surprised Ecuador got in. They played stout defense, and that's how they got in. They are on a 7+ game shutout streak, I believe. I think their shutout number is over 700 minutes since the last goal was allowed. And that's how they got through CONMEBOL's World Cup qualifying. If I'm not mistaken, they only scored 2 bloody goals the entire qualifying. Well, they doubled their total in this game. Why? Because Qatar was terrible. This kind of surprised me because Qatar was invited to be in CONCACAF's Gold Cup last summer, which the United States won, by the way. Anyway, and they were one of the more fun teams to watch. And they got all the way to the semifinal, only losing to the United States barely, before the United States went on to win the final. But they were very fun to watch all during that tournament. They were a must-see game. Didn't matter who they were playing. They were just absolutely mesmerizing in the way they went about things. They looked tight and in front of a home crowd that was boisterous to start. They looked like they were letting the pressure get to them. Ecuador, on the other hand, played loose, and like every 4 years, this is where they are. They're in the World Cup, and this is only their 4th World Cup. Now, I'm not saying they played great either, but with Qatar playing the way they played, they probably could have done with 1 goal. As it was, the ball was in the back of the net in the 3rd minute. It got chalked off due to offsides, but it was a sign to come. Afif for Qatar was mostly invisible. A lot of the game, he was going well back from the front line just to touch the ball. And his strike partner, Almoez Ali, was invisible. So invisible, he was subbed out for Muntari in the second half. And I'll get to Muntari in a minute. Standouts are the goal scorer. One guy beat Qatar. Enter Valencia, who scored the goal that was taken away due to offsides in the 3rd minute, had a 15th minute penalty kick. Why? Because Qatar's goalie was a complete idiot this entire game. I mean, he got better and actually got a save in the second half, but he was hesitant, bumbling, awkward in trying to come out for the ball a number of times. And in the 15th minute, he came out and took Valencia out after Valencia tried to dribble around him and probably would have scored. And so Valencia put a pretty easy penalty kick past him in the 15th minute. He got a second goal in, I think it was around the half-hour mark. And it was similar to the goal that got disallowed. It was a header from a cross into the box. And that was it. Unfortunately, Valencia wound up coming out later due to an injury. But by then, everybody was pretty sure how it was going to go. Qatar, they didn't have standouts. But if I had to pick someone, it would be Muntari, who came in for Almoez. He seemed to bring a little bit of a spark to Qatar in the second half, but it was too little too late, and nobody else got sparked. I mean, he was it. He had a pretty good shot at one point, barely missed. I think he was only over the crossbar by about 2 or 3 inches. But that's it for Qatar. They were like dreadful. The shots that they did get, I don't think a single one went on frame. I don't think the Ecuadorian goalie had a damn thing to do all game. And it was pretty telling that by halftime, the fair-weather Qatari fans bolted. After halftime, that stadium was about half full. And all of the noise was coming from the Ecuadorian fans. I have seen games where the fans making a bit of noise get a team back in the game. That was not going to happen with the Qatari fans in this game. They were boisterous to begin, the regular plebes, not the, hooty patootie guys in the white keffiyehs. The plebes were having fun. They were bouncing up and down. They were making some noise. And then by halftime, that stadium was silent except for the Ecuadorian fans, half of whom I would bet are not actual Ecuadorian fans. They are just third parties who that was the only game they could get tickets to. And because it was Qatar, they were going to root for Ecuador. But that's pretty much how the first game went. U.S. is up tomorrow, play Wales. I would like to be optimistic about our first World Cup in 8 years because we missed the last one. But we're in a group with 2 European clubs or teams, and we do not play European teams well. And one of those European teams is England, which is one of the favorites going into this World Cup. Wales is pretty much made up of Premier League players. A number of them are on fairly good teams. A number of them are pretty damn good. Most of our players who start are playing over in Europe as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how we play Wales. If we can beat Wales or at least get a draw out of it, we might get out of the group. Because the third team in the group is Iran. And hopefully we can redeem ourselves after the last time we had to play Iran in the World Cup. And they helped boot us out of the World Cup, which was just friggin' embarrassing. Hopefully we can get a little bit back on them. I think they are the third team we play, which will be sometime next week. Because we play Wales first, then England, then Iran. It would be lovely if we could get a draw out of England, but I don't see that happening. They've got some top-flight, world-class players in quite a number of positions. Now, we've lucked out in that top-class players have been dropping like flies all over the world. You've got Benzema out, you've got Sadio Mane out, you've got a number of other players who are top flight players in various positions who have just crapped out of the World Cup in the last couple of weeks. We haven't been lucky enough for that to hit England too much yet. They do have a number of players who are out, Kyle Walker being one of them. So I guess we will see how that goes, but I'm nervous about tomorrow and Wales. I think I'm going to wrap that up here. I didn't plan on going on this long, but that's what happens when you do a quick and dirty review of something. It can go short, it could go long. If you like what I do here, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and leave a comment or constructive criticism down below. I'll leave my social media in the description, and I guess we'll see if I do another one of these tomorrow. Probably depends on how the game goes and whether there's anything to talk about. There was a bit to talk about in this one, simply because it was Qatar. And I'll leave that here. Thanks for watching. Tschüss.